Hello and welcome to the Poetry Exchange. I'm Michael Schaefer. In last month's episode, I had to pass on the devastating news that we had lost Fiona. We're going to be bringing you a really beautiful episode of the podcast this month. It's a reissue, if you like, of the episode that Fiona recorded, where she brought in the poem that's been a friend to her. Listening back to it, it's just an incredible conversation and such a brilliant reflection of the amazing person that Fiona was. And when you hear it, I'm sure you'll all agree. But before we get to that, I did want to share with you some of the incredible messages that people have sent in. In last month's ep, I invited people to be in touch if they wanted to share any memories or thoughts and feelings about Fee, and we've had some really, really beautiful responses to that. One of the things that always delighted Fiona and myself about the podcast was the way in which it reached out across the world and offered communication and connection with people thousands of miles away that we'd never met. And so it's been really moving to read those messages. And I just wanted to say thank you so much to everybody that has found the time to put fingers to keyboards and to be in touch. There are too many to read, but I did just want to lift out a few lines from some of them to share with you all. This is from Catherine. I'm not sure where Catherine is from, but she says, Fiona gave me the feeling that all poetry is open to all when we open ourselves to poetry. The way Fiona talked about poetry, I never felt that there were any barriers or prerequisites, just the warmest welcome. Her enthusiasm and her compassion, and not least her warm voice, were such a steady presence. And although it may not have been Fiona's intention, I felt encouraged to start writing poems of my own, simply because I felt assured that every voice matters. It is so important and so exceptional that Fiona maintained this very humane and inclusive outlook on art and life. I will miss her very much. Lisa in New Zealand wrote this: I hear her voice, and in it the kindness, light and humanity she so embodied and shared with so many of us around the world. And this one from Nikki echoes a lot of the messages we received. She says, Fiona's voice was so beautiful and resonant, so warm, and with its own unique timbre and tone. I felt she was my friend too. I shall miss her. And there was also this message from the poet Dan Celotti, whose poem Compost had been a friend to Alice, and she shared it with us back in 2016 in episode 6, all those years ago. He wrote in to say, Dear Poetry Exchange, I woke up this morning and walked downstairs to make breakfast for my kids and checked my email real quickly, as I often do. I was completely knocked down to hear of Fiona's death. Every time I was in touch with Fiona, since one of my poems was featured on the show, I felt like I was speaking with a friend. We never met, but one time we talked about crossing paths somehow, and now the fact that I won't get to do that, well, it saddens me. But we have her words and her kindness and her passion for poetry to listen to always. In way of thanks, I want to tell you what my poem, Compost, being featured as friend to Alice, has done for me. Several years ago, I was setting up my classroom. I'm a professor at a small New England college, and I found myself overcome with a dark feeling that what I did meant nothing. I looked over my teaching notes and couldn't find anything in them. Everyone who has ever taught has these moments, I think, but that morning I felt alone in the world. I had 20 minutes before class started, so I walked to a back stairwell of the old building and looked into my phone. I received an alert that the Poetry Exchange had a new episode. I noted that, as I always listen, but decided to go back and listen to the show that featured compost. As I re-listened for the first time since it came out, it made me cry. My words, written in a time of great loss and pain, thanks to the craft of the poem, wound their way through whatever channel was required for them to find themselves in the ears of a stranger. I cried and looked up, and there in the corner of the old stairwell I saw a bat hanging there, sleeping. I got full-body goosebumps as it seemed a visitation, one that didn't need any words. I stood up, wiped my eyes, and returned to the classroom and taught one hell of a class. Thank you, Fiona, for the great gift of your life. All who even happened past you askance, like me, were changed. Of all the places my poems have gone, the Poetry Exchange is one that I hold most dear. Thank you so much, Dan, for allowing us to share that with our listeners. On a personal note, I'd also like to say how immensely grateful I am for the messages of support and condolence I've received since announcing the news of Fee's passing. It means an awful lot to me, and so for those whom I've not had the pleasure of meeting, and friends and people I know who are regular listeners and have been in touch, I just want to say thank you so much. Now, I mentioned at the beginning that this month's ep was going to feature the poem that's been a friend to Fiona. It's a reissue of an episode that we put out back in 2018, and it was originally recorded in France. A dear friend of ours and the project had invited us to her beautiful home in France, and we had a bit of a jolly, as Fee might say, and we recorded this incredible conversation. Now, in an act of sort of planned synchronicity, I happen to be recording this introduction that you're listening to now about 15 minutes away from where we recorded the original conversation. And I'm in the woods, and I'm looking out across the valley towards the house where we recorded it. Not quite as many birds about today as you might hear in the recording, but it feels nice to be that close. One other thing just to mention before we get in is that we were all mispronouncing the name in the poem when we recorded it. It should be, of course, Aibhín and not Aibhín, as I think we were all saying. So you'll be hearing Rebecca Manley and John Preble talking about A Kite for Aibhín by Seamus Heaney, the poem that's been a friend to Fiona.
It would be really wonderful to hear you read it for us, to bring the poem into the, I would say room, but into the air.
A Kite for Aibhín. Air from another life and time and place, pale blue heavenly air, is supporting a white wing beating high against the breeze. And yes, it is a kite, as when one afternoon all of us there trooped out among the briar hedges and stripped thorn, I take my stand again, halt opposite Anahorish Hill to scan the blue, back in that field to launch our long-tailed comet. And now it hovers, tugs, veers, dives askew, lifts itself, goes with the wind until it rises to loud cheers from us below. Rises, and my hand is like a spindle unspooling, the kite a thin-stemmed flower, climbing and carrying farther, higher, the longing in the breast and planted feet and gazing face and heart of the kite flyer, until string breaks, and separate, elate, the kite takes off, itself alone, a windfall. Thank you.
Thank you.
So to kind of start to talk about this poem, this friend of yours, can you tell us how you came to it, or how it came to you? You said it's an old friend, but not very old.
I sort of got two beginnings with this poem. It's a poem from Seamus Heaney's last collection, The Human Chain.
Uh-huh.
I went to see him read, and I bought the collection. And this did a curious thing. It did a thing a bit like a kite itself, actually, which was that it sort of caught me, and I kind of went, oh. But I didn't, it wasn't one of the ones where I really kind of hung in there to really, but it did catch me, but I didn't particularly stay with it. And then I heard it read again at this fantastic evening that happened after Seamus Heaney had died, and a group of poets came together in the South Bank Centre and made this extraordinary celebratory evening of his life and his work, and this poem was read, and I think whatever it was that had caught me on the page caught me again. And it's a friend that kind of, like somebody does, they sort of catch you and you think, oh, what's all there? But you maybe don't initially explore. And then an opportunity comes along for a second encounter.
It feels a bit like you were surprised by it the second time. Was there something different about it?
And the first time, I, for some reason, thought that it was to do with death, and that it was, I don't know, that it was sort of something being released in that way. And then, of course, I was hearing it at this memorial for him, but it was introduced properly by someone who knew him well.
Right.
And it's actually for his grandchild.
Okay.
So it's actually kind of about birth and childhood, I suppose. Mm-hmm. And then I suppose my ongoing relationship with it is something that I probably don't talk about very much, which is about birth and death. Just to go for the biggies. And I think actually, even in saying that now, I think what's so brilliant about the poem is that it's a single image, and yet there's a history to the image. So there's a present tense and a past tense, but there's just one image really, which is the action of a kite and a group of people. But I think birth and death and all of life in between are in there. Yeah, and physical. I love the physical. You feel the breath, or you feel the kite.
Yeah.
I think that's amazing that someone can do that. In such a compact piece of writing.
I'm really struck by just that initial catching that you had with it. I just wonder if there's anything more about that moment of really being caught by this.
That's interesting. I wonder if in fact what happened was that I dived askew. that it caught me and I deliberately didn't, that I slightly looked away, in fact, somewhere. Maybe that's what, I don't know, that's what comes to me now. It's the thought that I wasn't quite ready to really sit with what that possibly was asking me to sit with at that time.
Because it moves around and does have a past and a present and all of this, it would be really interesting to hear you talk that through, those movements of past and present and recollection and so on.
It's quite complex, isn't it? Because it seems to be a present tense moment, but it's a memory at the same time, I think. I presume it's going back to when he was a child, or not necessarily a child actually, just when he was with a group, as when one afternoon all of us there trooped out. I love that. You see, I love all the turns of phrase, trooped out. What comes with that is a thing of a group of people and what happens with a group, and we're all going to go and do the kite thing, and whether it's family or a group of friends. And then I take my stand again. So I think that means, he's returning to that memory. So it could all be memory, but from somewhere, I don't know why, I interpret it that there's a present moment going on, and as the present moment is going on, he's partly in this memory and partly in the present tense.
What strikes me as well is there's a lot about who's there, and it feels like this poem goes from sort of this loud cheers from us below and all of us there trooped out, and I'm picturing sort of big family walking, childhood memory, and then of course that's before we even get anywhere near the final line, which Kite takes off itself alone, a windfall.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of the kind of ongoing love I have of it. I just think that image is just so great of that, the crowd. Does he call it a crowd? No, just loud cheers from us below. But it's like you see a cluster of people, and yet there'll be one hand. There is one hand on the kite, so you've got this sort of, this group energy and willingness onto the thing, and then you've got somebody with it, and then you've got the kite alone up there.
Have you flown a kite?
I have, yeah.
And have you done it with a group of people? On your own?
I have done it with a group of people, and I'm sure that's also was probably in this moment of it first catching me, was the memory of that feeling of flying a kite. And because to do it is quite tricky as well. There's a whole thing about getting it right, because if you sort of don't have the right tension and everything, and you've got to work with the person who lifts it for you and all of that stuff. So yeah, I have a memory of it with my dad, and I guess the whole family, I would think, and probably other people around too, trying to get the kite to go up. Because there is an amazing sensation in the moment when you, because you can have several attempts, you see, and it doesn't go up, or it sort of goes and then dives back down or whatever. But there, that moment when it lifts off, that's that, and you've got it, and the relationship between you, it, the earth, the air, the person who's supporting you to achieve it is, it's pure. It's like riding a bike, or it's like all those things of the first moment of it all. You get, that's it, I got it, that's it, we got it, that's it, it's off. I think something in the image of the group and the one is very dear to me. I mean, obviously, in his case, he's celebrating a child or a birth. But there are so many other ways that we can be together to lift an idea or, to make the seemingly impossible happen.
Can I ask, this is might be a bit of a strange question, but when you read this poem, or perhaps specifically when you read it to us, were you in it?
Oh God, that's a really good question. I think in some ways I am the kite, actually.
That's what you sounded like.
Sorry to say.
Yeah.
Sounds terrible, doesn't it?
No.
Yeah, I think in some ways I'm the kite. And I suppose that's also because I think we all have, well, I don't know, but I had a number of times of acceptance of being ultimately, utterly alone, which has a connection to death, I think, as well. That that's what we are, and that's the thing that you visit that in a number of ways, I think. Yeah, I mean, that can be a terrifying thing. It can be a terrifying thing when you really think about it, and it can also be a joyful and liberating thing. And I suppose I think this poem holds both those things. It's not a simple image of liberation, although it is an image of liberation.
Because there is, I was just thinking about that, there is still a connection, isn't there, with the gazing face and heart of the kite flyer. So there is, like you say, there is liberation, but there is a connection to this thing below that's gazing up.
Because the poem offers itself to you, to anyone reading it, to find where you might place yourself, and so many different places within it and people within it, and just to hear you say that you think you're the kite, and to hear and to read this on the page and see the kite through all of those people and the kite flyer there, but the distance coming until separate, elate, the kite takes off itself alone.
It's quite shocking to me that I've said that I am the kite, actually.
Is it?
Yeah, it's quite shocking to me.
Why? Why is it shocking?
I don't know. It just feels like I can't quite believe that I've been having this close relationship with this poem and I haven't thought about where I am in it, if I am anywhere in it. I mean,
Is that something that you feel that you've known about that poem? That connection with the kite maybe has been part of it along the way?
Yeah, I'm wondering now if that's also part of why I avoided it. That's kind of a dimension of my mode of being is to be thinking about other people and not taking full responsibility for my own, what I need or what, slightly kind of not putting that lens on myself sometimes, and which just feels like a constant kind of balance.
And it makes it a very particular and very special friend, doesn't it? Because it's the friend that allows you to be the kite. And that's not to say that in other times, places, poems, you're not the group launching a friend of yours to be the kite. But in this place, you've allowed yourself, but maybe not without completely knowing it, to be the kite.
Yeah, I mean, and I suppose that is, that to be, cut from the string as well. I think something about the freedom of that space, which is hard. We're lucky, aren't we, if we get that, ever. It's joy, it's release, it's freedom. Yeah, I guess an understanding of the brevity of that as well. You know, it will come down.
You don't know where or when.
Or how.
You came in knowing how much was held in this one image. And therefore how much this friend holds for you, contained in this image. I just wondered, what kind of friend does that make this poem to you?
Yeah, I suppose the kind of friend who... They're amazing, aren't they? Those kinds of friendships where someone will be really connected to you and really, you know, really there, spooling and unspooling and, you know, on the end of the string or whatever, but will also, you know, go beyond, the kind of friend that will go beyond comforting, supportive, encouraging stuff, which is all really lovely and useful, but actually to push you on, you need someone who's prepared to cut the string.
A kite for Aibhín. Air from another life and time and place. Pale blue heavenly air is supporting a white wing beating high against the breeze. And yes, it is a kite. As when one afternoon all of us there trooped out among the briar hedges and stripped thorn, I take my stand again, halt opposite Anahorish Hill to scan the blue, back in that field to launch our long-tailed comet. And now it hovers, tugs, veers, dives askew, lifts itself, goes with the wind until it rises to loud cheers from us below. Rises, and my hand is like a spindle unspooling the kite, a thin-stemmed flower, climbing and carrying farther, higher. The longing in the breast and planted feet and gazing face and heart of the kite flyer, until string breaks and, separate, elate, the kite takes off itself alone, a windfall.
I've just listened back to that episode myself, and I have a feeling I'll be listening back to it quite a few times in the coming months and years. I just think it's amazing how Fee allows herself to be so vulnerable and so present with it. And that moment where Becca asks her the question, who are you, in this poem, and Fiona has that moment of realisation that she's the kite, just blows me away. It's amazing. And she references how one of her modes of being was to kind of be thinking of others. And I certainly feel as if Fiona is somebody who helped me to launch. She was kind of holding the string and I was the kite, and she enabled me to fly and to soar. And I know that she did that for so many people. So yeah, it's incredible to hear her be the kite. Fee and I always used to love those moments in conversations when people had a kind of moment of realisation about themselves or about the poem, or maybe both. And we were able to kind of capture that, something kind of happening in that very live way. And I just think it's incredible that she was able to do that and sort of not stand outside of it in some way, but to be right inside it. We've been in the habit of doing bonus poems, as we call them, at the end of episodes. And I mentioned last month that Fiona's collection was going to be coming out soon. I should have some more updates about that for you next month. But we thought it would be great to feature Fiona reading one of her own poems. So this reading was one that Fiona did when she was on somebody else's podcast, Harry's Poetry Hour. So we'd like to thank all of the team there and Lois P. Jones for allowing us to share it. We'll put the link to the video. There's a YouTube video where you can see Fiona reading more of her poems, and we'll put the link to that in the episode notes. So this is Fiona reading her poem, Imprint.
Over the last year or so, I've been noticing how hands and gestures tend to appear in my poems. I used to hear poets I admired a lot talk about how they noticed a certain motif recurring in their work, and I used to think, I don't have any motifs, nothing is recurring, and that everything was very eclectic. But then I did notice this business of the hands. And with the background that I have in theatre, I worked in theatre for over 15 years in various roles, and I still collaborate closely with many performers and performance companies, and I take huge inspiration from that field of work and those artists. And I suppose there's also a constant curiosity, and I've always had that, I think poets have this as much as actors, but that sort of obsessive observation of human interaction wherever you may be. So I've been exploring gesture in theme and form in my poems. Sometimes it's a poem about a gesture, and it's also that idea of the poem itself as gesture, which resonates for me in what happens for me when I read poetry. And you have that sense of the nature of the gesture that is coming from the poem itself. So this is called Imprint. A hand on the shoulder, a knee in the back, a cheek shoved on the pavement, a neck strained back, a ring on a finger, a band of gold, an arm wrenched from its socket, a kiss gone cold, a fist raised in power, a fist clenched in fear, a fist in the playground, a fist in the ear. Fingertips tapping, fingers waiting to be heard, fingers feeling for a switch, fingers feeling for a word, palms cupped for water, palms meeting in prayer, palms raised to lift the air. A hand lifted in a classroom, a hand on the edge of a boat, a hand tethered to a railing, a hand raised to vote, a statue in iron, a statue in stone, an arm raised in victory, an arm severed to bone, an arm laid beside a body, a head dropped low, a hand held forever, a hand let go.
I'm going to leave it there this month, but we'll be back with you next month with more Poems as Friends. Until then, thank you for listening.